All right, Darren, we've been out here for a while. I agree, it is a little bit chilly.
Yeah, your nose is starting to turn a little pink there, Brian.
Yeah, my hands are getting a little cold. And you know, when that happens, I realize my Roundup that I want to spray today, it's probably not going to work like it normally does. Why is that? And what do I need to do to correct the problem?
What I think is fun is there are a lot of no-tillers that are out trying to burn down some winter annual weeds.
Yep.
And you know what? It's cold weather. And so they've got to do some things to make sure that that Roundup is going to work.
What we wanted to talk about here is with Roundup, let me just start and give you our first rule of Roundup spraying. It is if the nighttime temperature drops below 50 degrees within 2 days before or after spraying, we need to increase the Roundup rate by 50% as long as that's still an on-label rate. If the nighttime temp drops below 32 degrees within 2 days before or after spraying, don't even spray. You're just wasting your money, you're wasting your time. Okay, so why is this exactly? Let's get into the why part now. Why do you have to do this?
Okay, when you say, you know what, if it's going to get below freezing, don't spray. I think a lot of farmers would say, yeah, that makes common sense. You know, that plant's probably going to shut down if it gets below freezing, but wow, below 50, Brian. You know, if I'm in Montana, I'm saying, hold on, I'm below 50 every single night. So what are you talking about? Are you just trying to sell me more product? And the answer is, well, no. You know, we just want the product that you use to work. Here's why we say that you need to increase it 50%. Because once we get below 50 degrees, that plant's metabolism just slows down a lot. So that Roundup is going to take a long time to work through that system. And when you think about how Roundup works, especially on the broadleaf weeds, it has to go to each growing point all the way down that plant and deliver a lethal dose. If it's moving that Roundup super slow through the plant, it has that much more time to break that product down.
Yeah, but it's before that even. It's when you're spraying. When you spray, is the leaf really going to absorb as much liquid when it's cold as compared to when it's hot? No way. So I just look at this thing as I don't get as much into the plant. I don't move it as quickly to the growing point. And when those two things don't happen, then I know I have a lot less product at that growing point. I may not have a lethal dose anymore, and especially if I've got broadleaves where I may have 20 or 30 growing points like on a little lamb's quarters plant that I'm trying to kill early in the spring. Well, you're going to kill all the top growing points, but you won't kill those lower growing points because you just run out of steam. So you've got to up that rate, or of course the other choice is just wait until the weather warms up. Even though we don't farm a tremendous amount of acres, we farm about 2,700 crop acres, we've got 2 sprayers on the farm. So I can wait until just the right time. I've got 2 operators, 2 sprayers, and we can roll. And I can get everything done. I could spray the entire farm in 2 days.
Well, you know what? That's nice, Brian, to be equipment rich. But here's the other side of it. A lot of guys say, hey, I'm a one-man show. I don't care if I own 2 sprayers. I'm the one that's got to run them, and I can't run both of them at the same time. So here's what I need to do. I need to add something to that mix to make this work. Maybe I need a tank mix partner. Maybe I need a different spray additive. You know, what can I do that I can add to the tank to still make it work?
Well, I just look at it as you've got to up your glyphosate rate. Okay, so maybe in some cases you can throw something else in, but that actually could be a detriment. We used to talk to farmers all the time years ago who would throw in 2,4-D with the Roundup on the burn down. And I just said, what in the world are you doing that for? Because the 2,4-D is going to shut the plant down before the Roundup can get in and kill the root.
Well, hold on. That's a pretty big blanket statement there because it all depends on the rate of 2,4-D, the temperature when you're doing all this. Yes, on a hot day with a strong rate of 2,4-D, you could fry some of those really susceptible weeds quick and Roundup wouldn't make it in. But you know what? We're going to have 2,4-D tolerant crops here pretty soon. We're going to be using a lot of 2,4-D in Roundup, and I can just guess right now the rates that they're going to put in there are going to work. So they're going to figure out what the rate is. They can't have too much 2,4-D or too much Roundup. It's got to be just the right balance.
Well, it depends a lot on if we're talking annual weeds or perennial weeds too. But anyway, our whole point here is just think about how herbicides work.
The other thing is you have to do everything right. So that means when you're looking at the label and it says put on 17 pounds of ammonium sulfate per 100 gallons of water, do it. Don't skimp on that. Don't try to use some cheap AMS replacement product. You know, some of those are good, but AMS is still really good. So use the AMS. Then look at the rest of it. If you're looking at cold weather spraying or sometimes on the warm side, it's right on the label that you can put non-ionic surfactant in there at 1 quart per 100 gallons. I would suggest that in cold weather spraying as well.
One last thing I guess I would point out here. So let's say you're normally out there spraying 32 ounces of name brand Roundup and you're going to bump it all the way up to 60 ounces or 50 ounces, whatever you want to do when the weather's cold. Okay, Did you need the 32 ounces? Do you need the 50? Do you need the 60? It depends a lot on the weed. What I'm trying to say here is, for green foxtail, for example, if that was the weed I was after, you got more than enough at 32 ounces.
So in other words, if you're already spraying a rate that's much more than you need for the particular weed you're trying to kill, you don't have to get carried away. You have to use a little bit of common sense. But when you're spraying Roundup in cold weather, we typically recommend increasing the rate or waiting till temperatures warm up.
Well, that could be a big factor, Darren, if you've got our Weed of the Week. Can you identify this week's weed?